There's three problems with the free will defense. Is there free will? You have to defend there's such a thing. Is it worth it? Well, what are the options? The third one is, why doesn't God intervene more against the worst sufferings, against the worst abuses of free will?
Welcome to Thinking About God with Dr.Barry Whitney. In this series, Dr. Whitney explores the formidable challenge of reconciling belief in God with the evil, injustice, and suffering in the world. What can be learned from theological study on this problem? What can be learned from faith? Separating good and bad answers by sound theological and biblical study and reflection has been central in Dr. Whitney's attempt to justify belief in God despite the world's evil and suffering.
Davis, quite frankly, is the majority view. This chapter 3 is a major one. We've read chapter 1 with John Roth representing atheism, despite the fact he calls himself a theist. Chapter 3 is kind of the main answer today. This is the free will defense. This is the big one, and you're going to see that it's not error-free. There are challenges to it. I don't think the challenges are really all that powerful, though. But you need to know what this free will defense is. It's a free will theodicy. It's a solution to the problem of evil based on the fact that free will is such a great gift and that God, in giving us free will, doesn't control us. Just like you can't control your child someday, the use of free will, or your parents can't control you now. Free will makes us largely independent. Doesn't mean we can do anything, but it means free will is a real gift. And the higher up we go in the scale of life, the more freedom we have. Freedom to produce incredible moral goods and incredible moral evils. They go hand in hand. Look what we can do. That's horrible compared to what a dog can do. But look at the good that we can experience compared to what a dog can experience. The higher up in the scale, you start seeing the advantage of being free. It's the image of God for Christians in us. It's part of the image of God that we have this God-like capability of freedom as well as knowledge and willpower and all kinds of these blessings. But free will is what makes us distinct from everything else in the universe. The higher animals might have a smattering of it, but most of that's just instinct. This is genuine free will. I'm saying point number one is just that. Point number two is that this one says God could do everything. God could control everything, but God has self-limited God's power. God holds back. Self-limitation. The thesis is we have free will even though God could do anything and everything, all the good, all the evil. God could do anything God wants. By the way, we say God can do anything God wants unless it's a logical contradiction. God can't make a square a circle at the same time. God can't make yesterday today. God doesn't do the logically impossible. But God can do anything that isn't logically impossible. Davis agrees with that. God can do anything. God could take away all the evil. But God has chosen to hold back, to have genuine free will. And all Davis says is, and I don't even think you need this, Davis says the free will has to lead to a balance of good over evil. It has to lead to a greater good. God ensures that the balance of good over evil justifies giving us free will, and the balance of good over evil is attained in no other way than to allow the evil. I wouldn't even bother to even say that. I would just say free will is such a great gift. Who would not want to be free? Put up your hand. We'll get the lobotomy tonight. We'll just take it away, this burden. This one's touchy because our whole culture, as some of you know from the other class, is starting to make arguments that there's no such thing as free will. I think they're completely nonsensical. If we don't have free will, we might just as well cash in the chips now. Every thought, every action, every emotion, every event is all determined by genes, heredity, the environment, and the old version would be it's all determined by God. It's a meaningless life if everything's determined the way some of these so-called naturalistic atheists think. I've mentioned that in here. It's not in the textbook, but Davis pulls out some criticisms of his belief in free will. See, Davis has to argue against people who say, wait a minute, you're solving the problem of evil with free will defense, saying God gave us free will, so we are responsible for the evil. And the natural laws are necessary so that they can support creatures like us with free will. The whole onus of the argument is free will is real. It's a gift from God. There are at least 3 or 4 criticisms against free will. One is scientific, one is philosophical, one is theological. This is not in the text. Let me explain them just quickly. The scientific argument against free will, people like Albert Einstein. Einstein died a determinist. He didn't believe in free will. Einstein says God doesn't throw dice. It's not up to chance. He doesn't say God determines everything. He says nature determines everything. He didn't believe in God, but he believed nature was God, right? That nature determines everything. There's a lot of scientists who make an argument that chemistry, physics, biology, the environment, our heredity, all of these factors cause everything that happens. There are so many factors that we can't really understand them all. Just like next week we'll see an eclipse of the sun, it's all been predicted because we know all the factors involved. The scientists are saying there's no freedom, not all scientists, but some very influential ones. There's no freedom. Everything is determined by physics and chemistry and natural laws. Now, if that's true, we have no free will defense for the problem of suffering. The problem is it's not true. If there's no free will, we're all in trouble. And quite frankly, there's no argument that's any good that proves there's no free will. Those of you who are in the Tuesday class, you understand, so the others catch up. We've been reading naturalism.org, a nice little website by these atheistic naturalists. The naturalists, this is the philosophical background of modern science. Naturalism, which says that every single thing that happens can be attributed to a natural physical cause. And if we knew enough about all of those causes, there would be no free will. This is a terrifying thought. Brain researchers, psychologists, philosophers of mind, they're all studying naturalism and the lack of free will. If that's true, then you have no excuse. You come to class, you don't come to class, you pass, you fail, you live, you die. It's all meaningless because it's all been determined by natural causes beyond your control. That's what a small segment of the philosophical, scientific world believes. I think it's a bunch of hogwash, but we'll see. See, if that were true, we put the books away and we say, it's meaningless. And if life is meaningless, the problem of evil is meaningless, nothing means anything, so there's no point in even talking. And that was my determined decision. I had no option but to say that, and you have no option but your reaction. If there's no freedom, we're in trouble. So Davis is saying, I'm not convinced by scientific arguments against free will. He also says, I'm not convinced about these philosophers who tell you in the philosophy classes there's no such thing as free will. It's incredible how many people believe that. And you'll find that no one has made a good argument for free will except that God gives it to us as a gift. It's almost impossible to prove free will. The Bible never tries to do it. It just assumes it. Turn and be saved. Follow my law. These are appeals to free will. Why bother saying it if everything's determined? Philosophically, theologically, there's some Christians who believe in one God, who believe that everything is determined by that God. So this stuff is theological, philosophical. The philosophers who say there's no such thing as free will, science says it as well. There's an awful lot to deal with here. The theological determinism says that everything is caused by God, you have no free will. The scientific and the philosophical theism says everything is determined by physical causes, so you have no free will. What a horrible... If you wonder why, the big question today is life meaningful? It's no longer, how do I follow God's will? How do I become a good spiritual person? Is life meaningful? Our culture, which doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe that life is meaningful. It's determined. It's run by blind evolution, which itself is determined by hidden causes. We call them chance, but it's actually hidden causes. This is a culture that basically is embedded in philosophical determinism, scientific determinism. And there are some theists who believe in God who are theological determinists. I think this is all a big, bad mistake. This culture has no answer. It doesn't think life is meaningful. And that's our biggest problem in this culture. How do I be good? How do I be happy? What's it all about? This culture is worrying about how meaningless it is. Read Samuel Beckett, Jean-Paul Sartre, the nihilist, the existentialist, the naturalist. This culture has no answer. Of course, if life is meaningless and there's no God, your suffering's meaningless too. But that's not a good reason to toss out God. I've got to tell you, when I say there's such a thing as philosophical determinism, let me just tell you what that is, because I've mentioned it here. Mackey, John Mackey, an Australian, he died around 1982. He started this whole thing, by the way. He wrote an article back in 1956 or whatever about the problem of evil, and we've been talking about it with a passion ever since. John Mackey and Anthony Flew. Anthony Flew is an atheist who just this year was in a debate with a theist and became non-atheist. After 100 years practically, 90 years this guy's been around, atheism books, atheism teaching, he's finally been converted into realizing that it's a dead end. Mind you, he's not really a theist, he's a deist. He's admitting now there might have been a God in the beginning, but he doesn't know what that God does. But that's a start. So Anthony Flew and John Mackey give you what they mean by philosophical determinism. Listen to this logic. If you've got free will, that means you can do good or evil. This is Mackey and Flew. I'm going to put them both together here, so we haven't got time to sort them out. Mackey and Flew say, if you can choose between good and evil, you have free will, and on one occasion you choose good, it's logically possible that you could choose good on every occasion. It's logically possible. Now, if it's logically possible, God should have made you that way so that you could and would choose good every time you use your free will. On one occasion, you've chosen good. That's right. That's valid. Number two seems to be valid. It's logically possible that on every occasion we could choose good. That's logically possible. It gets weird, though, with the third one. Therefore, God should have made us that way, because it's not logically impossible, so that we always choose good on every use of free will. It's a tough one. A million words, and not just in writing, but in classes. Mackey's still a hero. He's just completely destroyed theism in the minds of some people. This is still the logical problem of evil. God should have made us so that we always use our freedom for good. Now, the simple refutation is, it doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. Would you really want that? Is that free will? We walk around and we thank God for the gift of free will, but the minute you want to do something evil, an evil thought, an evil action, you're denied that use of free will. To have free will that's only used for good obviously is not free will anymore. It's divine manipulation. It doesn't work. It's seductive. Like, look at this logic. It's not logically impossible, therefore it's logically possible. God could have made it that way. And you know, there's a theological determinism that says pretty much the same thing. The Calvinism, definitely in Christianity, it's a minority view that God could have made every decision for us, but somehow we're still free because the act comes from us. God gives us a desire, and we freely choose that desire. Therefore, we're responsible, but God does it. Theological determinism says that you can have a God that does everything good, supposedly, but we are responsible. It doesn't make any sense. The last time we did this, we spent 3 or 4 weeks on this traditional Calvinism stuff. It doesn't make any sense. There's no point in me telling you that I can make sense out of this. It's a mystery. God could do it all. He could make it all good, but we would still be responsible, which means we're not free, but we're acting according to what our character dictates. It's my character that chooses this. Therefore, it's my action. I'm responsible for it. But God made me choose that by making that my desire. I don't think it works. I've spent so many years on this. It doesn't make any sense. God does everything according to some secret plan. God does it all. But we are still responsible because we choose it. Why do we choose it? Because it's our greatest desire. See, that would be good, but the next sentence is, God gives us that great desire. Of course, we're going to choose what we most want. It's a strange one. But that's the argument theologically, to make a long, complicated, wicked story short. And I've just mentioned that. That's Mackey, Flew, Calvin, they're all thrown in there. The big question for Davis is free will worth it? Right out of Roth. Is it worth it? You know, I think this comes down to, it sounds like the atheists are saying, give us a perfect world and then we'll believe in God. Take away the suffering. Give us this wonderful utopia. The trouble with that is that you can't have free will in a utopia. Do an experiment sometime. Put 3 people in a room and watch how 2 of them persecute the third with their free will. The peace is disturbed. One's going to lead, one's going to follow, one's going to be persecuted. Human nature. That's what free will does. I know that's simplified. Excuse the theology of all the majors that know better. If you can imagine what a utopia where there's no suffering, no grief, no tears would be like, you have a mind greater than all the greatest minds in the universe, because no one can imagine how you can have a utopia where there's no suffering and there's still free will. If you get rid of free will, is it worth it is the question. What are the options? Well, if God created creatures on some planet out there without free will, they would definitely be in some utopia if God said no free will, but look at all this fun. Pleasure, ecstasy, joy, no suffering at all, but no free will. How could we say that they are a greater level of creature? Like this thing has no free will too. How can something with no free will choose to enjoy anything? It doesn't make any sense. No one has ever thought of what a utopia can be like without free will. When you read science fiction, the option usually is, would you rather have a perfect world or would you rather have free will? I'm sorry to say Star Trek thought most of the people in the audience would say, I'd rather have a perfect world without free will. So that's how Captain Pike left. That was his choice. We'll see that next time. I personally would choose free will with all the dangers and all the joys. But that's up to you. I mean, if you actually find yourself at night saying, I wish I had a lobotomy, I wish I had a lobotomy, I don't want to be free, I just want to be happy, well, you and Captain Pike are one. But I don't think that many of us will join you. We'll bring you flowers. Think about it. This is the problem with the free will defense. Number one, you've got to argue that there is such a thing as free will against the scientists, the theologians that don't believe it, and the philosophers that don't believe it. Number two, you've got to make an argument that it's worth it. And my guess is the only option is if God takes away the free will or intervenes way too much against our free will, we have lost what it means to be a human being. It's our greatest gift. It's our greatest danger. It's what makes us distinct from everything else. We can destroy the place, or we can build a utopia of our own with free will, allowing opinions. And if God is love and wants to share the love and the freedom God has, that's what we would expect. Forced free will is not free will. There's no such thing. So that's number two. Davis has to show that free will is worth it. And remember, I'm saying there's three problems with the free will defense. Is there free will? You have to defend there's such a thing. Is it worth it? Well, what are the options? The third one is, okay, there's got to be free will. That was a good thing from God. It's going to be risky. Free will is going to be used by most people for good, but there's going to be people who, and all of us, who are going to use it to make other people miserable. My guess is 99% of the suffering that you and I have been through are caused by another person. A careless word, a nasty thought. It's not nature. Nature's responsible for nasty things, diseases and hurricanes and floods. But human beings cause most of the suffering. I have no doubt about that. C.S. Lewis thought it was about 75% human beings causing all the suffering. My guess is it's about 99. We're all capable of that. I know every time I've suffered, it's another human being. Even if I get some bloody flu, it's another human being that gave it to me. I don't blame those poor little bugs. Now, here's the question. The third question is, why doesn't God intervene more against the worst sufferings, against the worst abuses of free will? That's the big one for the free will defense. Granted that free will is a blessing. Free will is the greatest gift we have. Free will is a wonderful, amazing thing. We can choose God, love each other, build a paradise on earth with it, almost. Not quite, because we're just so corruptible. I doubt we're capable of that, despite all the optimism in science. But why doesn't God intervene more against all of the bad uses of free will? That's a fair, legitimate question. We're reading these hard chapters. They have all the right questions. These as a guideline. Why doesn't God intervene more? Now, pop over in your mind to chapter 2. John Hick's going to say, I've got at least 5 reasons, he says, why God doesn't intervene at all. There are theological answers to why God doesn't intervene. Boyd has some arguments. If God gives us free will for a period of time, in our time on earth, it's irrevocable. If God revokes free will every time we're going to do something miserable, or if God upsets the natural laws too much, the whole thing becomes unstable. That's kind of the drift of the answer. John Hick has, like I say, about 5 interesting reasons he answers this question. Davis says, I don't know. Davis says, I think God intervenes now and then But I just don't know, says Davis, why God doesn't take away that suffering and this suffering that seems to be just meaningless. Like this child or that child or this hurricane or this 9/11, like all of these horror stories. The Achilles heel is God has the power to intervene and take away your suffering or mine. So the obvious question is, why doesn't God do that for you? Everybody. Where does it end? There are reasons. It's not like we have nothing to say.
Please join us for more episodes of Dr. Whitney's God and Evil series and other series that will be available on this channel. Dr. Whitney is an acknowledged international authority on the problem of evil, for which he has published dozens of important works. These include his book, Theodicy, The Problem of God and Evil, the only definitive annotated bibliography on the problem of evil, as well as his popular book, What Are They Saying About God and Evil, and dozens of other books, book chapters, journal articles, and book reviews. He has also published articles in the New Catholic Encyclopedia and in the forthcoming New Westminster Dictionary of Christian Theology. For more information and resources, please visit Dr. Whitney's website at drbarrywhitney.com and his Facebook page, Thinking About God with Dr. Barry Whitney. The God and Evil series was recorded in Dr. Whitney's university course on God and Evil. The lectures have been edited for a wider audience and enhanced by music composed by Dr. Whitney specifically for this series. This God and Evil series is the property of Dr. Whitney, 2016.